Who makes or causes the covenant that's going to launch the tribulation? The Antichrist, like everyone thinks, or maybe someone else? Do you think you know? Maybe we don't know. A 2,500-year-old prophecy from the book of Daniel may be coming true starting this fall. Daniel 9:27, the prophecy Christians have waited for and sometimes feared for generations, coming to pass in a couple months. This makes this the most important thing we could talk about right now. Today, we will look at the most unusual part of that prophecy, a part that has been biblically hidden. Yes, I said it's been hidden. And that part has everything to do with the covenant. Now, I know you are probably familiar with this verse, but today, I promise you, we're going to see it in a way you have never seen before. You might start out saying, hey, Nelson, my favorite Bible teacher says the covenant is an agreement between the Antichrist and Israel. And, I'm going to know it when I see it. Really? Ask that teacher where that is found in the Bible. You'll probably hear crickets in response. And here is why the book of Daniel is intentionally silent about the covenant with the many. Today, we'll show you how I came to know that. Then we're going to discuss who it is that makes the covenant or causes the covenant to be made. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and today we're looking at that portion of Daniel 9:27 that Daniel doesn't really fully explain. If it's fulfilled as soon as 2 months from now, as a community of believers, we need to understand this part of the prophecy as fully as we are able. You may also be asking, why is the world so crazy right now? Are what we're seeing in terms of European and Middle East conflicts, assassination attempts, and stock market drops, are they all related to this? They likely are, and to who it is that's causing this. Today, we'll explain all that as well. Let me read Daniel 9:27, and I want you to notice that there are 4 main sections of this verse. Count them for me. And he shall make a strong covenant with the many for 1 week. And for half a week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Okay, did you notice the 4 sections? It gives us the 4 main details of the coming tribulation period, the 70th week of Daniel. The covenant, the taking away of sacrifices, the abomination of desolation, and the desolator, the Antichrist. 4 separate sections. I've been studying this portion of Scripture a lot lately, both because it's important and because it may begin to be fulfilled in a couple months, maybe on the Feast of Trumpets. That study and biblical meditation led to an amazing conclusion. 3 of those 4 sections we just read of Daniel 9:27 are explained in a lot of detail in the rest of the book of Daniel. But 1 section isn't. For example, the taking away of sacrifices is written about in Daniel 8:11 through 12 and Daniel 11:31, where the sacrifices are clearly defined as the regular burnt offerings happening in the future. Partial preterists who think this was Jesus' death, removing sacrifices back in the 1st century, please take note. The abomination of desolation is also covered in Daniel 8:10 through 13, Daniel 11:30 through 31, and several timing details about it are covered in Daniel 12:11 through 12. And facts about the desolator, the Antichrist, get big chunks of Scripture. Daniel 8:9 through 25, and Daniel 11:21 through 45. A full 50% of 2 chapters. By the way, for those of you interested in studying these ideas, rewind the video and write down those verses. They'll give you insight just like they do for me. But the covenant, the event that kicks off the tribulation, where is that found in Daniel? Where's it explained? Outside of Daniel 9:27. It's important It's the first of the 4 events, and it lasts the entire 7 years of the 70th week of Daniel. But where is it mentioned in the rest of Daniel's prophecies? It gets one more verse, and we'll discuss that in a bit. And that just struck me as very, very odd. The angels who gave Daniel the visions went out of their way to explain those other factors, those other 3 factors in the tribulation, but they said next to nothing about the covenant. And that cannot be accidental. That is intentional. God himself withheld most of the details about that covenant in the book of Daniel. So if you have a lot of questions about it, you shouldn't be surprised. It also means that if you're following a scholar who thinks he knows what this is all about, maybe he knows less about it than he is letting on. Why did God do this? Why did he obscure understanding of the covenant? He had to have had a reason, but he's God and I am not, so any thoughts that I have about why he did this are a poor guess of his motive. What is important to know is that he did it. The takeaway, however, is that the covenant isn't well understood, and we should treat it that way. Our hypothesis is the covenant with the many will come out of the United Nations meeting that is being held this fall on or about the Feast of Trumpets. We base that on the information we do have from Daniel 9:27. The UN considers this the most important meeting of a generation, the summit for the future, out of which they expect an agreement or covenant will be produced, something they're calling the pact for the future. Our guess is that this is the covenant of Daniel 9:27, and if it is, we need to learn as much as we can about what the Bible is going to tell us about it, because if we're correct, the tribulation will be launched this autumn. We need to know this, so let's look at the one part of the covenant with the many from Daniel 9:27 that God has permitted us to understand fully, the sentence about the covenant. This is the part that God has fully revealed, and he shall make a strong covenant with the many for 1 week. The first thing to notice is a he is behind this, and that's what we're really focusing on today. Also of importance is that in the Hebrew language, the covenant of Daniel 9:27 is a covenant, not the covenant. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, when the divine covenant with the Jews, the Abrahamic covenant, is mentioned, it is always listed as the covenant, or in Hebrew, ha-barit. But here, it is just barit. Again, partial preterists who think this is the Abrahamic covenant being strengthened by Jesus, please take note, it is not. The covenant is a secular covenant in this verse, not a holy covenant like it is earlier in the book of Daniel. A secular agreement, as will be made by the UN this fall. So far it's a match. In Daniel 9:27, it's being made with the many. The Hebrew word here is the same as the word used in the term many waters from Numbers 24:7 and Isaiah 17:13. In Revelation 17:15, we're told that many waters are peoples, multitudes, and nations and languages. The many, therefore, in our opinion, are not just Israel, as a lot of scholars want to claim, but rather Israel plus many nations. And this certainly also fits with the UN covenant this fall. The next term we see is the verb, will make a strong, as in make a strong covenant. And unfortunately, this is a bad translation of the verb. We've discussed this on the channel before. This is the hefel form of the Hebrew verb gabar, which means to be strong or mighty, if it was on its own. In the hefel form, the verb means to cause to make strong, to cause to be mighty. And I know this is like a bit nerdy, but it really affects what happens with the covenant. It's not being confirmed. It's not being made. Someone causes the covenant to be prevailed upon someone else or forced upon someone else, likely the world, the many. Someone who is the he is going to cause it to be forced upon the world. So this also is at least possible for the UN treaty they're proposing. A he could definitely cause the covenant to prevail over the many for 1 week, 1 7-year period. By the way, it's extremely doubtful that the covenant's going to have like a 7-year term date. What this is more likely meaning is that the covenant will end when Jesus returns and ends it. The covenant itself will probably not have an end date. It will probably be what they term an everlasting covenant. But of course, it's only 7 years because Jesus ends it. Now, how might this play out in the upcoming 2 months between now and the Feast of Trumpets? If nothing happens in the next months, it's a little hard to see the covenant being forced upon the world. However, if chaos breaks out, as it seems to be breaking out already in terms of a war in the Middle East or in Europe and an economic crisis, it's easy to see how the covenant could be forced on the world to protect them from these things. This means someone would be causing this to happen. Think about that. It means if war escalates in the Middle East or Europe, we hear about these things every day now, that someone could be causing these things to happen. If an economic crisis happens, and we see that happening on the worldwide basis right before our eyes, and seemingly for no good reason at all, that someone is causing that as well. Someone behind the scenes creating crises in order to make the covenant happen. With a mainstream media that seems to be sold out to this cause, it is extremely doubtful we will ever see the man behind the curtain pulling these strings until it is his time. Speculating on the exact identity of who this is now, to me, seems pointless. We may know better in 2 months, but it seems someone is doing this, a prince of the covenant. Now, what's very interesting to me is the book of Daniel makes an offhand reference to this prince. Let me explain, because I think this is brand new information to every one of us. Let me say that again. Pay attention now, because I think this is brand new information. In Daniel 9:26-27, it says this: "And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and he shall make a strong covenant with the many for 1 week." I took out some words so you could see who the he is referring to. The he is the prince of the covenant, so to speak, the one who causes the covenant to be forced on the world. Remember, the Bible doesn't refer to this as a habarit or a holy covenant. It's a secular covenant. The man who forces the secular covenant on the world. And that exact term, prince of the covenant, is used later in Daniel 11:22. Again, the same word for prince is used, and the same word for covenant, a berit or secular covenant. So it's talking about the same thing. Daniel 11:22 is an obscure passage, but here's what it says: "Armies shall be utterly swept away before him," and they're talking about the Antichrist, "and broken, even the prince of the covenant." So this makes it seem like the prince of the secular covenant, the one who's broken, and the Antichrist are different people. That he is someone other than the Antichrist. That whoever is behind the covenant will be broken by the Antichrist later in the tribulation. Whoa! Let's stop right there. In the entire book of Daniel, God gives us one additional clue about the secular covenant that's coming. And it might be that the prince of the secular covenant isn't the Antichrist, whom nearly everyone has thought. Because from Daniel 11:22, it appears the Antichrist breaks the prince of the secular covenant. But they might be two different people. Can you see why this would be important, and why Scripture might inject this one clue into the book of Daniel? Because otherwise everyone would think the prince of a secular covenant is the Antichrist and would be totally deceived. So you can think about that for a few moments and say, isn't that interesting? Because that's what I've always been taught. There is also evidence for this same thing in Daniel 9:27. Let's look at that verse in more detail. And he shall make a strong covenant with the many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. That's what the prince of a secular covenant does. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Notice there appear to be two characters, one who causes the covenant to be forced on the many, and the desolator who comes on the scene at the abomination of desolation. Now, this is our theory, not proven fact, but our theory that maybe the one who is the prince or leader is the leader of Mystery Babylon, and that the Antichrist, who comes later, destroys him and Mystery Babylon. You know, in Revelation 17:16, we see the Antichrist of the 10 horns, or 10 kings, burn Mystery Babylon with fire, the organization or global system that had ruled over them. I think we'll be able to identify this prince of the covenant who causes the covenant to be forced on the world within 2 months. So stay tuned to this channel. I already have an idea who it might be, but I'm not going to say yet because I'm not certain yet. But you may have more questions about the UN agreement being the covenant. The Bible does contain other clues about it. There are actually 4 separate passages in other books of the Bible, other than Daniel, that identify it more clearly. Click right here to keep watching, and we'll show you definitive evidence that the covenant is also a peace treaty, and most likely the UN covenant that's coming. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.